Hello and welcome to episode 27 of the Carrie on the Carrie podcast. Today I am really excited to have Jamie Louise Madigan with us. Jamie is a poet and the author of Lipstick Stains and Coffee Cups. This is her debut poetry collection that she released in February of 2023, and I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. This is pretty exciting stuff. You've had quite the year with your book debut, and can you tell us a little bit about how that's been for you?
Yeah, it's been good. So my first book being released, I decided to self-publish it, which has been quite the journey. If you go with a traditional publisher, obviously they cover a lot more of the back end. Whereas if you do it yourself, you're the one making all the phone calls, emails, marketing. So it's been really fun to reach out to people and to get all their insights and connect with people in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And so released it, and I found that the part that makes me the most fulfilled, I think, is being out there and doing a lot of the markets. So I have it available at Indigo, where I can do book signings and people can come in. And I found it so amazing to just meet people who come in, they chat with you, they share about their story, and you're able to just immediately connect. And that to me is just so fulfilling. It just warms my soul. So that's been the most rewarding part of it so far.
Isn't that don't you find that amazing? And that's kind of like the whole thing with the podcast too, is the more you don't realize how many people are willing to open up. And once you give them obviously you have a very calming presence about you too, and a safe, somebody safe that they can talk to.
Yeah, I feel like it's a nice little vessel almost, because people will approach my stand and it's not listed on there what the book is about. They'll just see the cover. They'll say like, "Oh, lipstick stains and coffee cups. Like, that's so funny. I leave lipstick stains on my coffee cups." And then I tell them my little elevator pitch is like, "Oh yeah, it's actually a story about when I was 18 years old and I had an abusive relationship, and it talks about how I escaped it. It's all told through poetry." And then they're like, "Oh wow, like I have a daughter who went through an abusive situation, or I'm currently in one, or I just got out of one," or like, and it just opens up their mind to all these different things. And they share their stories with me. So
wow,
yeah, it's been very soul cleansing, I'd say.
Oh, I imagine, yeah. And so can you give us a little bit of background, so you brought up that, and I'm so sorry that you had to go through that, being in an abusive relationship, and the vulnerability it takes for you to open up about it. How was that process for you, even just writing the poetry? Was it healing? Was it all of the things?
Yeah, it was so writing it out, I started writing the poetry as I was going through the breakup, as a way to actually just organize my thoughts, because I find that when you're in that tumultuous abuse, your thoughts and your mind is just like all over the place. So I was like, I need to take these like tangled Christmas tree lights and put them in order and like finally see what's going on, because sometimes when you write, you don't actually know what's going to come out. Like there's so many times I'll sit down and I'm like, I actually don't know what I'm going to write. And then you start writing and then you look back and you see it and you're like, oh, that's how I feel. And now it's like permanently right in front of my face and I can't ignore it. So you feel very exposed. So it's a lot of, exposes a lot of parts of your psyche that you maybe have been ignoring or that you thought you'd kind of shoved under the carpet. But, in a way that was also healing too, because it's stuff that I almost didn't want to acknowledge about the relationship. But once it was over, I felt like it was almost safer to write about it, because I was like, this is done. Now I can write it out. There's no need to hide it, because I was hiding a lot of it from my friends and family, because I didn't want to tell them like the level of the severity of what was going on. And so once it was done, I was like, okay, well now I'm safe to kind of put it out there. So.
And how did that feel like? Was there this part of you that was, I mean, obvious, I think I would be scared about the person that you're in the relationship with, them finding out and them hearing about it.
I still am. I have moments of like, oh, I'm sure he's heard by now that there's a book out here about him, but it's, to me, it's almost like it's less about the person and it's more about like the art. Like I think of it as like, okay, now I actually have this, like this vessel that I could have turned all of the darkness, and put it into art and used it to help other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like take away the power almost from him in that way of being like, yes, I went through something terrible, but like, look at the silver lining. Look what I was able to build from it. And I would have never been able to build this level of like strength and confidence and like clarity and purpose if I hadn't gone through that. So it's crazy to see how my life has sort of ebbed and flowed. And even like this poem, these books were all written. Sorry, this one book, written 10 years ago. So like the theme for the book, at the tagline for it is a decade ago, my heart cracked open. These are the remnants. And so it was 10 years ago. So I was 18 at the time. I'm 30 now. Your life obviously ebbs and flows and you go through different experiences. And now I look back on it and I almost think of it as like a fever dream. Like there's so many moments where I just think, I'm like, oh yeah, that was really terrible. But you block so much of it out. Like you don't want to even remember. But that's why I think of it of like, these are the remnants of like the broken pieces of me that I like kept in a like in a casket and just sort of like kept there. And these like all the burnt up pieces of my heart. And yeah, I don't know if that's a little too intense to describe it that way, but that's sort of the theme of my poetry. I'm very visual and a little bit more gruesome in describing that I navigated through the pain.
It makes sense the way you put it. In fact, like for myself, being in therapy and trauma informed therapy, all those things, that's, they tell you to put it in a vessel that you can open up at any time, but you're safe. Like, so the coffin itself, actually, I like that analogy because it's like it needs, I like that. You just helped me out, I think, a little bit with that analogy. I can, and the burnt pieces everywhere.
It was like these like the remnants of I just went through the war and like this is an explosion and like I got burnt to pieces, and then you have all of these like trinkets and small little bits of yourself that you kind of can keep there. So like the remnants, I guess the metaphor would be is that the remnants are like the poems, and so that kind of followed the theme of how all the poems loop together and like how I organize them all in order. So yeah.
So can you share a little bit about what you experienced when you were in your relationship, in the abusive relationship?
Yeah, so it was first of all, it started out very good. This person I was drawn to, he was very fun, very lively. He had a lot of the same interests as me. Like I loved fitness. He's into fitness, healthy eating, and we always did like all these fun things with him and his friends. We'd have like board game nights, and so I think the hard part about that is that you almost didn't see it coming. Like it was quite the blind side because the whole personality was very like charismatic and funny, and he almost had this quirky kind of nerdy energy to him too that was very enthralling. That I was like, oh, he's kind of quirky and a little bit weird, and so like you wouldn't imagine someone who has those personas so dark and twisted on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
And so it started great, and then very gradually there were small little things that would happen to the point where it still slowly started to get very bad. So it was small things like he didn't like, first of all, he would make comments about the clothes that I wore. He'd be like, oh, I don't like that. That doesn't look good on you. That's not very nice. He would start to make comments about my weight. That was a very big thing. 18 at the time, I was a very average weight. Wasn't super thin, wasn't super heavy. Like I was just very, very just in the middle. And he would constantly pick apart like, oh, you shouldn't be eating that. You should. We went to restaurants one time, and the dessert menu came. very specifically. The dessert menu came and he said, I'm trying to just remember. So it came, she dropped down the dessert menu. As soon as the waitress walked away, he like kind of snatched it out of the table and was like, you know, you don't need any of that. And he ordered one for himself. And then the waitress came and dropped down cutlery, and he took the cutlery to his side of the table. And like just I had to sit there and I had to walk and just eat dessert.
Wow.
And so I felt that was sort of like the beginning of like, I started to feel very critical of myself and my body image of like how I showed up, what I dressed. I'm like, am I attractive to him? Is it going to be enough? And then it started to go into my thoughts and my experiences and my expressions. So I would come up from work one day, I would tell a story about like, oh, I have this funny thing happened at work. And I would be explaining, like when you explain a story, I think your voice will change octaves as you tell, or just to even impersonate the person talking about. So I would explain a story and I'd be like, yeah, this funny girl said this and ha ha ha. And he wouldn't even listen to the story I was saying. And he'd be like, why are you talking like that? Why did you change your voice? Why is your voice like that? I don't like that. Like, that's not. And I was like, okay. So just very, very small things like that where he would kind of just kind of nitpick at stuff where it never was, nothing I said or nothing I did was ever good enough, or it never felt like he didn't like me for who I was. Mm-hmm. And then actually started, you know, saying things to me like, you know, you're ugly, you're disgusting. If I wasn't with nobody would be with you, like, you know, just terrible things. So that was the main scope of how it all sort of started to happen.
And was it mostly emotional abuse, or did you go through any physical abuse as well?
There was one time that I actually, someone had asked me about it on a podcast, and I had almost forgotten. So in my head, I said, oh, yeah, I don't know, but I don't know if it counts. And like, yes, it does count, but I blocked it out in my head, and then I was only reminded when she asked. So there was one time we were watching a movie, and we were watching a movie, and I guess I had said something that he didn't like, and then we were joking around, we were laughing, we were having a great time, because in abusive relationships, it's not always terrible. There's always peaks and valleys, so there's very good positive moments too.
Which is why you stay.
So I thought, and so, and then all of a sudden he just switched, and he just ended up hitting me in the face, like slapped me just in the face. So it wasn't a punch or anything. It just was a quick slap, and it was like, you know, like, watch your mouth. I don't want you to say whatever you said. But I was so shocked by it. Like, I ended up crying, and then he ended up consoling me afterwards and said, like, you know, like, that's okay, but like next time you can learn to watch your mouth. And I remember going over in my head of like, I'm like, what did I say? Like, I've always been a very kind, respectful person. I've never been a type to like instigate or to like poke the bee's nest or say things that would like ever inflict harm on someone. That's just not how I've been raised. And so I remember at the time thinking like, what to say? I don't know. Even to this day, I remember it was just something I guess he wasn't happy with, and he just completely went off. And even after that, like I still stayed, which is terrible, but you're so enmeshed and you're so trauma bonded with this person that it's very hard to kind of break those ties once you're so deep into it.
Mm-hmm. And we were talking about this before we started recording about just the fact of, you know, a lot of people will say, well, why didn't you get out sooner? Or why didn't you, you know, why did you stay so long? But I mean, for me, the strength in itself is being in a relationship like that and being able to have the strength to get through another day in it. And then when you finally break free, right, that like the strength that it would have taken, like if you can look back at your little self, like your 18-year-old self, and say, wow, I'm so proud of you for, you know, being able to get through that. Like,
I think like the biggest thing that really did it for me was realizing, like coming to the realization that like I knew I wanted to leave. I knew that I felt like I was deteriorating every single day. And I remember thinking, like, I'm too young to feel like this. I'm like, I feel like absolute garbage every day. I feel like I'm an apple that's literally just thrown into the woods and that's just like decaying into the earth. Like, and I talk about a lot of that in poems too, and thinking, like, why am I constantly nauseous? Why am I crying my eyes out every single day? Why do I suddenly have no friends or no like real relationships with my family or anyone around me? Like, why is my bank account drained? Like,
right?
You know, why do I like hate who I am as an individual? Like, there's so many uncertainty of like, I feel like I was just completely stripped of everything that made me who I was, because I was told that that's not, like, you're not allowed to feel those things, or you're not allowed to have any level of enthusiasm for your life, you know? And so that to me was like, okay, I really need to evaluate. And it was actually, even in that, once you realize you want to leave, like, the scary thought was, I was like, okay, I could stay with him and be miserable, or I could leave and have a shot at being happy, but then I wouldn't have him. And so in those two like dilemmas in my head, I always chose to stay, because I felt like if I left, I'm like, well, then that means I'm on my own, and I don't know who I am on my own, because he influenced so much of my thoughts, behaviors, actions. He kind of like morphed me into this version of who he wanted me to be, that I had no self identity. I'm like, if I'm on my own, then I'm thrown to the wolves. Like, I have no clue who I even am without him. So that was scary to sort of navigate and know and realize, like, okay, if you do this, then you are literally starting like from the bottom, and you are going to have like a really tough time crawling yourself out of this.
Right. And so can you explain a little bit about what was it that finally made you leave? Was there one instance, or was it just a whole bunch put together?
There was a lot put together, but the one instance, so this is, I've never told this story before. This is really intense. So
if you're comfortable. If you're comfortable.
What's that?
If you're comfortable. Yeah.
It's crazy to talk about it out loud, because I don't know if I've ever explained to anyone like the thought process of events that happened. So first of all, I found out that he had been cheating on me, which in a way was terrible, but that wasn't like the pinpoint of like, I want to leave you, but it did give me a sense of relief. And I thought, okay, now I have an easy out. Now there's no way that he can twist this in any way. I can just leave, and it doesn't need to be a thing. So as devastating as it was to find out, I'm like, okay, I have that he's cheating on me. That's one thing. Secondly, I looked into myself and said, okay, do I want to live the rest of my life feeling like I'm dying? No. Right. So, okay, so I'm gathering up kind of the information in my head. And that in itself was also very overwhelming. And I remember standing at a train. Yeah, I knew I had to leave him. And I remember standing at like a train platform. And throughout the relationship, just as like just to give some context, he was very, he used a lot of mental health stuff against me. So he would say things like, if you leave me, or if like you break up with me, like, I'm just going to kill myself. And so that was also a reason why I would stay, because I was so nervous for his mental health and for his well-being, that I was like, this is someone who I love and care about. I would never want anyone to do that or to harm themselves, because I was very like empathetic, and I just loved him so much. And so but turns out, just, I'm kind of going to go a little backwards here. Flash forward, I ended up meeting two women who also dated him in the future, and he had said the exact same thing to them and threatened to end his life as leverage to hold it over them to make them stay. So at the time, I didn't know that. I didn't know that he was being manipulative. I genuinely thought that this was someone who was going to harm themselves. And he would be like this all the time, and he would constantly like make threats about ending his life, and get to the point where he'd be like, oh, you know. And then it kind of started to seep into my psyche. And so when I was gathering up these tools in my head of thinking like, I need to end this relationship, I remember standing there like at the train, and I had the thought of like, okay, he's cheated on me. And then I don't feel terrible anymore. I'm like, I don't know if I can do this, if I can live my life without him. And the train like came, but I remember for a split second, I thought like, you should just jump in front of it. And like, I have never had a thought like that, like in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've always been very kind, like happy person, like always loved life, always had a zest for life. And I thought like, and the train obviously passed, and I was like, oh no, like I've become so much like him. Like I am morphing into who this person is. Like, and I'm so enmeshed with this person that I can't even imagine my life without him, that I would think of like for a split second doing that, which I'm glad I didn't, but like, I was like, I can't believe this. So that was the moment where I was like, okay, enough is enough. Like, I don't know what I need to do. Like, this is insane. And so I was just weeping. I remember the train came, I opened up the doors, went on, I went on to get home. And I remember just like weeping on the train, and everyone's looking at me like, no one's hello or asking how I am. And I'm just hysterically crying because I'm just overwhelmed with emotion. And I go home to my house, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna do it. I don't really have a plan or what to say or what to do. I'm just gonna do this. And so I went up to this box in my room. He had given me this knife. Basically, he had this knife that he used to use where he would like cut his arms, and he said, okay, as long as you have this knife, like, I'm never going to hurt you. I'm never going to hurt anybody else. Like, I'm not going to hurt myself. Like, this is my kind of testament to you.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, he lied and cheated and manipulated me. So I was like, okay, this knife is symbolic of like our relationship. So I'm going to give him the knife back. So walked all the way to his house. He was home. He has his doors unlocked. So I just walked in. He was upstairs in his room playing video games. Walked in to his room, put down the knife, put it right down on his counter, didn't even say anything, and literally just walked out. And that to me was the moment of like, okay, like, I'm doing this. It's committed. Like, I am done. Mm-hmm. Keep walking. Do not back. And I kept walking, and because I didn't drive at the time, so otherwise I would have just driven there, but kept walking straight home. And then all of a sudden I hear these like footsteps, and I hear like someone behind me, and obviously he's ran out of his house. He's running after me, and I look around, and his face is completely white. Like, I've never seen him look like fearful or have any sort of element of fear in his eyes. And he looked like he'd just been like seen a ghost. He looked so stunned, because I'd never done that. I'd never stood up in my life, and he mumbles out an apology, and it's just like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I was like, listen, I'm like, and it was so crazy because I've always been very timid and very, very sort of like in my shell, mm-hmm. and didn't really ever speak out for myself in the relationship. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. And I turned around, I whipped myself around, and I was like, what are you sorry for?
Right.
And then he's like, oh, I'm sorry for, hanging out with like the girl that he was, his ex-girlfriend who he had hung out with. And then he kind of just said whatever. And then I was like, what else? And crazy. Like, and I was like, I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience. I'm like, who is this person? Like, why am I being insane right now? But like, also like suddenly finding my voice. Like, I've never done this for like the whole time I was in. Anyway, so I kept it very short. I just turned around to him and I was like, listen, I'm like, I am done here. I'm like, and I said to his face, I was like, you are an emotionally abusive person. I'm like, when this ends with this girl that you decided to do things with, I'm like, when this ends, do not expect to have me here because we are done. This mm-hmm. is done. Have a great life. And I turned around and I walked back, and I didn't shed a whole tear the whole way home. I had been crying my eyes out for 4.5 years, the entire relationship. Ended up leaving the relationship, and that day, not a single tear was shed. That's insane. Like, I just felt so relieved. I felt like I could just breathe again. Obviously, there was a lot of pain that happened after that. I think I was just on the high from relationship and finally, like, getting a little leverage of power back. But, it was crazy. It was a little dramatic. Actually, in hindsight, I'm like, I guess I am a little dramatic at times. Like, I needed to make a very clear statement, but I knew that if I didn't make a statement that clear, I would have I don't think if he would have understood it, or he would have been able to weasel his way or make me think something else. So I was like, I need to be strong and firm in this, and just like not, and telling him to his face, like, you're an emotionally abusive person, was crazy to me, because I'd always thought it, but I never said it out loud. And then I said it to his face, and he just was like, okay, well, whatever, like, you know. But it was a very interesting turn of events. Once that happened, I felt like I opened up a different area in my brain of like, okay, we're going this way.
Right.
Now,
right. And I hear you say that you sound like you were so dramatic, but to me, I hear strength. I don't hear like that was the end of the drama for you. You put that line in the sand and you made your point very clear. And to me, that was the boundary you needed to set up, and the way you did it sounds like strength.
Yeah. And I think like that was sort of me beginning to even learn about boundaries, because I think before I didn't understand even what a boundary was, or like how to stand up for yourself, or how to express yourself, because my expressions were always squashed by him. Like even just having general enthusiasm for life, like he just always would squash any sort of thing. Like I'll give an example. Like I would do my brother. He's like the flash mob coordinator for Thriller Calgary.
Oh, sweet.
He was a couple ago. So, yeah, obviously Michael Jackson Thriller dances, amazing, so cool, dressing up as zombies every year. And we would do flash mobs in the mall, and like no one would know, but we would be coordinating and planning the dance for weeks. And then we would all dress up as zombies. And like, it was a cool family thing that I got to do with my brother. My mom and sisters and nieces and nephews would all do it. And like, it was great. And I remember telling this boyfriend at the time about it. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this Thriller thing. I hang out today, do this. And he's like, that is stupid. He's like, that is absolutely stupid. And I understand that like people can have very different opinions on what they like and what they don't like. But he was so clear in his opinions that he was like, this is dumb. You are stupid for believing that there should be any level of joy in this.
Right.
And that was a constant theme of like, I'm right, you're wrong. How could you possibly enjoy something that brings you joy?
Mm-hmm.
So it was a lot. But I know you had asked if you wanted me to read any poems that kind of triggered a thought of that. So I could read one relating to that. Okay, the poem is called Passion. So here's how it goes. My eyes would light up when I talked passionately about something I loved, only to feel yours pierce into mine, slaughtering every inch of exhilaration, looking in disgust as if I was roadkill. It's no wonder you always cast me as the villain in your story. A world where freedom of speech is crucified and enthusiasm is the deadliest of sins.
Wow.
That's it.
That explains it though so much to a T, that feeling of, like, yeah, you didn't have a voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was very hard to kind of regain that voice. Once I had left, I felt like I did go back into this shell of a person of not having any confidence or any self-esteem, or not thinking I was worth anything, because those are the thoughts in my head. He said to me, even like weeks prior to me ending the relationship, he's like, you know what, if we break up, you're just going to sit here, you're just going to watch Netflix, you're just going to cry, you're just going to like wither away to nothing. Like,
right.
And I remember after we broke up, I wanted to prove him wrong, like so badly. So I didn't watch TV, I think, for like that entire year. I was like, I'm not going to sit on my ass and watch Netflix. I'm going to get up. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to work out. I'm going to find my passions again. And so I decided to upgrade my school. So I was upgrading school. I was doing the gym. I was also working in a restaurant at the time. And then I even decided to do an extracurricular. So I was in a play. And I kind of just stacked my schedule so full of just all these things, to the point where it was almost me like avoiding what was going on. Like I was in a lot of pain, but I was like, let me just shove my schedule full of everything I possibly can so I can avoid what's going on. So I went almost the opposite way of like avoiding the situation. And then I finally reached out to a therapist and worked through, you know, active ways to heal and ways to like regain your confidence in mental health. But I think the first way I did it wasn't really the best in hindsight. Like healing always linear, but you know,
it is. And you can't like, even that itself, like the strength that you kind of do have to numb yourself, but if it sounds like a healthier way of numbing, you know, yes, you're squashing down those memories, but sometimes you need to in order for them to kind of fade just a little bit. But when you talk about, okay, so you wrote these poems, this book of poetry, you were saying just around that time, or was it kind of over the 10 years?
Yeah, so it was over, so it was about 10 years ago. And I wrote them all sort of when I was going through the breakup and then the years after that. So it was like going through the breakup and then 2 or 3 years as well, too, of just kind of finding myself and like meeting new people. And so I look back on it now because saying like, yeah, it was 10 years ago. And it does feel like it because it feels like I'm so far removed from how long ago I wrote them, but I just had the idea of actually putting it into a book just like in the past 2, 3, 4 years, I'd say, to finally actually put it into something, if that makes sense. I'm hoping I'm describing that correctly.
Oh yeah, for sure. And so having done that, so when you're writing the poetry and you were going through that whole process, did you find each one of them, did it bring you back the pain, but at the same time bring you the healing kind of?
It made me feel really sad for myself. I feel like I gained a lot of self-compassion because at the time I was writing them just to write them and kind of keep them just shoved in a drawer in my room. And then during the pandemic, like I ended up realizing like, I actually have all these poems that are just sitting there. And I remember sharing them to a couple friends here and there. And I started kind of posting a few of them on Instagram. And I got some really good feedback from a lot of my friends and family. And they're like, hey, you're actually like really good at it. You're really great with words. And like, this is awesome. Like you have something here. And I thought, I'm like, okay, well, I should do something with this and actually make it into something. So I finally did. The pandemic was a blessing that I was able to go and work on it and organize it all. I kind of printed them all out. And my favorite part was organizing them all. Like I had everything printed on paper and laid them all out on my kitchen table. And I was like, let me tell this in a story so that the poems can read in chronological order of beginning to end based on the emotions that I felt them in. So if you read the book beginning to end, it tells a story through the poems on how I kind of worked through everything. But it did, in the editing and formatting, I had to obviously reread through them all like multiple times over. And I felt this layer of just a lot of pain and just like self-compassion for myself of thinking like, I can't believe that you allowed that to happen to you. Like I still have moments where there's like these moments of shame of just like, why would you let yourself do this? But then you like through therapy, you realize like, you know what, it's not your fault. I also was very young and naive at the time. I didn't know any better. We didn't have the resources that we have now to understand like the words like narcissism or, you know, abuse or gaslighting or any of that. Like those weren't common terminology at the time. I think at the time I just assumed people were kind, and then I remember the abuse being so bad that I almost tricked myself into thinking like, this can't possibly be happening because it's so terrible. Like you must be imagining it, like, or you must be thinking that this is just, you know, a bigger situation than it was, you know?
Right.
So,
and that's how they twist it on you, right?
What's right?
That's what I think winds up happening, is that twisting of your thoughts. And when you go through therapy, they kind of go through that with you. That's part of the abuse, is they put the onus on you that you must be losing it. You must be, you know, you're crazy for thinking what you're thinking. And so you start to believe it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was very, I definitely did believe a lot. I thought that I was, because you do feel like you're going crazy. You're like, I must be the only one experiencing this, because my only like your only lifeline in that relationship is the other person, and the person that you're basing all your truth and all of your like principles on is someone who has no principles, no morals, like,
Right.
no of like treating people with kindness, integrity, respect, none of that. But that's kind of the person that you're going through, seen as this beacon of light. So it's so twisted to finally get out of it and realize, like, oh, I put this person on such a pedestal when they literally had no problem putting me like 6 feet under.
Right. Yes.
You know?
Yep. And
Yeah.
so now I remember you saying that you were afraid to talk about it. You didn't talk to your family or friends about it because it's, you're embarrassed, you're shameful. That also, I think there's that side of it where you think, well, what if it works out? And you don't want to, them to not like him and all those things that kind of come up with that. And now when you left, what was your response from your family and friends? Did you open up about it?
They were very relieved. I didn't actually have a lot of friends left at the end, so my family was very relieved. It was nice for my family for me to finally be back in family settings and actually be there, because prior to that I would go to family events kind of begrudgingly. I would be there like lights on, nobody's home, like I just was there as sort of like a body in a room. I wasn't actually present, I wasn't actually engaging. And then that's what was the hardest part about my parents, especially my mom, watching me go through it. Like, she had told me, I could see the way that he knocked the light out of your eyes. That was one thing that she said to me. And I think for her, and then also for my dad and for the rest of my family, just to see me kind of come back to life was probably very nice for them, because they felt like they had sort of lost their daughter for a while, which they had. Like, I physically was there, but mentally I was not there.
Right.
So
yeah, and see, that's the thing, is like, to give hope to other women or anybody else going through something like this, that those people, family, friends that were there, you might have lost some of the friends.
Yeah.
But somebody's always there and knows what you're, like they're waiting for you to come back, kind of thing.
Yeah. And the beautiful silver lining about the friendship piece, to your point, I did lose quite a lot of friends in the process, because a few of them said to me, like, it was a very turbulent on and off relationship, and they had said, if you get back with this, like, we will no longer be your friend. Mm-hmm. Like, this is how strict it is. And at the time, I was one-tracked mind, tunnel vision, didn't really care about their opinions, which is very selfish of me in hindsight. But when you're in that dynamic, you don't know any better. So I kind of said, you know what, screw you guys, I'm going to choose him, which is very stupid in hindsight, but, we live and learn.
Yeah, and it's not, and again, those words, I think, take those out of your narrative, because that's what you had at the time. And we're so hard on ourselves, and you were doing what you thought needed to be done at the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I felt like it was a lot, and I worked on that through therapy too. It was a lot of like reprogramming in my head of like what you thought was right and wrong. Like, I very much was just thinking like, okay, now I need to like build a group of friends that are uplifting, and that like I know what I've gone through, accept me for who I am. And the best thing about this is that I ended up meeting, so I became friends with one of the women that he had left me for the first time, who I had a very strange feeling about. I was like, I don't know about this girl, and I thought she was terrible and all this. And her and I ended up connecting. We became really great friends. We're still friends to this day. I went to her wedding, but she had the exact same experience that she had with him. And then I also became friends with another girl who I had to go to a music festival with him, and with him present, we had broken up, but we had a lot of mutual friends. Mm-hmm. So I still attended the music festival because I didn't want him to kind of strip away anything else from me. I was like, you know what? I want to still enjoy my life. I can do this with our mutual friends. I can just stay kind of distant from him. But I did. I was polite but distant. Like, we did not speak. And at this festival, I saw him with this new woman, and I didn't know if they were dating or anything, but I could see the way that he was laughing with her. And I remember I was sitting around like on the lawn chairs, and I remember looking at him just like telling jokes and seeing how she was so mesmerized by his presence and by the things he was saying. And it felt like I was watching a horror film. Like I felt like I was like, I cannot believe that I'm watching him do this now to another girl, like telling the same jokes, like acting the exact same way, and watching her. It felt like I was watching myself from like a bird's eye view.
Yeah.
And it made me so sick to my stomach. It wasn't, and the strangest thing is it wasn't a feeling of jealousy. It was not jealousy. It was like, I need to get this girl out of here, because
right.
This is like someone walking into a lion's den. Like, I cannot allow this. I had this like visceral reaction where I was like, get this woman out of here. So very strange, because it was hard for me to navigate it, because I didn't want to overstep. But there ended up being a great time where we were actually left alone, her and I. One of the mornings, all the people were taking a long time to pack up their luggage. So her and I were kind of just chatting, waiting for everyone to pack up their tents. And I said to her, I was like, listen, like, really enjoyed spending this weekend with you. Like, you seem like a really sweet girl. I know you've probably heard about me. I don't want to come off as like the crazy ex-girlfriend. I don't know what he's told you, but if you need anything, like, please don't hesitate to reach out, because it was a very hard experience for me going through what I went through with him. I didn't tell a lot of details. I kept it very vague. I was like, just so you know, I want you to know that I'm here for you. Like, I was just looking into her eyes, being like, woman to woman, like, I got you. You know what I mean?
Right.
And she was like, yeah, okay, sounds good. Like, and that was it. And then a couple of weeks later, we actually ended up going on a hike together, and she expressed to me that she was experiencing a lot of the same situations, and same sort of thing, and very, very similar stories. And she was confused and going through a lot of pain and going through a lot of like uncertainty with him. And she ended up getting out of it. Her and I are still friends to this day too. And so now I have this like community of like incredible women who are just like experiencing the exact same thing. They're so badass. They're so successful. They're so unique in all their ways. And I have these friendships with these women that I would have never had if it wasn't for him in the first place. Like, even the first girl, she was there when I was going through the breakup. And she stood there with me, and kind of even was, very helpful with getting me out and inviting me to things and saying like, hey, like, girls' night, we can sit, we can just like drink wine and talk it out. She was more than happy to be a listening ear for me, even though she didn't want to hear anything about it because she had dated him too. But she was very, very kind and respectful to me. And it was nice to see that, like, to see women come together in such a beautiful way when, over time in history, you see sometimes women being pit against each other. And so it's really nice to know that we kind of came full circle.
Yeah. And they listen to you, but see the difference is the way you came to them, in a loving and kind way, I think. Right. Cause I think sometimes it goes wrong and women don't want to hear it. And it's like, it becomes a jealousy thing. And so it sounds like that's amazing to me. As women, we need to start supporting each other a bit more that way, I think.
And it's so nice because it's kind of, at first it was kind of awkward when we all went to kind of like group events and stuff. Everyone's like, oh, we know each other. And we'd sort of make a joke and be like, oh yeah, we have the same ex-boyfriend. Like, but now it's like, we've all been in each other's lives for so long that we don't even talk about him. We don't think about him. Not even like a talking point. It's just like, we've built our lives in a way that we're so proud of the things that we're doing and our successes and our work and our passions that it's just not even relevant anymore that he kind of tied us together. It's just sort of like, it's great, it's a nice silver lining, but we've built the friendship like on our own terms now.
That's amazing. Okay, so leading into that, I would love to go through kind of the evolution of your book. We talked on it a little bit, but the beginning starts off as kind of the deeper, darker side of things, and then it switches. Can you tell us how this kind of morphs into the end of the book?
Yeah, so the book is split into two halves. So the first half, I like to say, is like the blood, guts, vultures being shoved into the earth kind of aspect of the book. Very gruesome, very dark, disturbing. That's just my style of writing. So if people love dark and twisted, you've come to the right place. That is the first half of the book.
Yeah.
I didn't want to like leave people in the darkness for too long, so I added this second half, which is sort of symbolic of the cost. So the first half is the lipstick stains. The second half is symbolic of the coffee cups, and so it's the feeling that you get when you drink a warm cup of coffee in the morning. Like, you know, the feeling of like adrenaline rushes, new beginnings, like just like the warmth, comfort, happiness. And so that's sort of the feeling that you get once you're sort of out of the darkness. So it covers a lot of themes of how I developed a little bit more self-esteem, how I realized that, you know, it's okay to be alone if it means that you're not with someone who makes you miserable all the time. And it also talks about this person who I ended up meeting, this guy very shortly after the breakup, and I had met him on a night that I didn't want to go out. I thought that this bar that I got dragged to by one of my friends, I thought that my ex-boyfriend was going to be there, and so I was not in the mood to go out. I was in the throes of heartbreak. I was very depressed. I was like, I don't want to go, and she's like, oh, you should just come. And I ended up meeting this guy who just, it was like this breath of fresh air. It was crazy. Like, I felt so invigorated just in his presence, and he had this zest for life. And kind of when you talk about like the eye, like how my mom said, you know, he knocked the light out of your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Look at this man, like his eyes when he talked about the things that he was interested in, his eyes were just lighting up as he spoke, and he was so passionate and so creative, and I was just so captivated by his presence. Like, he was very magnetic, and it felt like a complete shift. Like, I felt this weird feeling wash over me of like, okay, now there's going to be a shift now happening in the way that you do things. And it was so crazy because it was just one night out at a bar, random person who I meet, and him and I kept in touch, and we ended up becoming like good friends and getting to know each other. And I found out that, you know, he was actually struggling through a breakup himself. He was struggling through a lot of kind of demons in his own life. But he made me realize that, like, just because someone is struggling, going through hard things, doesn't mean that it needs to be detrimental to their personality.
Mm-hmm.
And he sort of taught me to believe in love again, even though that love was never with him, but it was like because of him that I realized, okay, I can open myself up and I can be vulnerable, and good people do exist. And it was firing off like so many different things in my brain of like, this person, like,
right?
And I don't know if he even knew that. Like, he was just being himself. He was like, I'm just gonna be my authentic, honest, straightforward self. And I was very attracted to it. And so I think, in a way, I almost was also trying to unwire those like attachment styles. And so I think one of the things that I ended up doing was I was like, okay, I'm no longer in this abusive relationship. I now meet this amazing person, and like my brain was like, well, maybe this is the love of my life. You know?
Right.
Like,
yes.
Like, maybe this is the way I'm supposed to go. And I almost went that way to the point where it was a little bit like overdrive, where it's like, okay, you're going too far into Candyland here.
Right.
In a way, like, it was so nice because I think he could sense that energy, and he could sense that I was in like not in a good headspace, and and he was very kind and respectful of me, and knowing when to set up his own boundaries of being like, hey, you know, like, you don't need to be so, like, you can be good on your own. And he just kind of taught me to sort of like be good on my own, but still was there to be super supportive and just kind. And like, we just had a great connection. And like, he ended up inspiring like a lot of the second half of the poems, where it does talk about, you can see it talks about me sort of romanticizing him in a way of saying like, oh, this is this incredible person, which he is. But it's someone who was so incredible that like wasn't even trying to be this beacon of light, but they ended up kind of shifting everything for me and taught me that like, I can now go into the world and I'll be good on my own, So it's one of those moments where it's a lot of people I told the story to, they're like, oh, maybe that's like a twin flame type of thing. I was like, oh, maybe. Like, I'm trying not to delve too much into it. I like to just appreciate something for as it is. But just because something, beautiful doesn't mean you need to run towards it with, sprinting towards it. You can just actually appreciate something for being beautiful and just kind of leave it at that. And so that's kind of what he taught me. So it was a very interesting shift that my life took after that.
Right. And honestly, that's, I mean, again, that strength I see in you, because you've, the fact that you kind of were recognizing all of those things while it was happening. It can also be I think with trauma, we can wind up the romanticizing and jumping in too quickly again and putting too much on one person. So it becomes like the fact that, he opened your eyes up to so much more. So where are you at right now as far as your healing and relationships, and if you're willing to share that?
Yeah. So I'm single at the moment. What I really have been doing lately is just really learning to enjoy my fate. So I ended up moving out on my own. I have this condo, which I love. I worked really hard to make sure that I could move into a place that I can afford and that I'm proud of. And like, it's got tons of sunlight. And so sun comes in the morning, and I wake up in the morning, and I sit on my balcony, and I just drink my cup of tea. And I've really just been learning to enjoy my own company and just my own time and space, and kind of cultivating a place of peace, to the point where I feel like I've prioritized my peace so much that now I'm like, anybody that comes along, if I date them and they come with turbulence or they come with anything that's going to disrupt my peace, I don't have any interest for it. I also have no interest in being with someone that I'm not like attracted to or have a deep emotional connection with. Like, I don't want to be with someone who I feel lukewarm about, because I don't think that that's fair for me, but also for the other person. I think relationships should be really interested in your partner, and you're a team, and you want to learn and grow together. And I think as a society, like as you get older, like in your 30s, a lot of people say, oh, like you're single in your 30s, you're gonna like be alone forever, or your standards are too high. But I would much rather keep my standards high, and I have no interest in diluting them just so that I can have just so I can bring a +1 for the wedding invitation, later on. Like, I can go to a wedding, no problem, on my own, and like drink the champagne. I have no interest in having someone just to have someone. I want to have someone that I'm excited about and that I'm proud of. So
I love that. I love hearing that. It gave me a lot of hope, for sure, because it's something, again, you just think you're alone in that, or you're the only, but the strength in loving, because I've always been told that you have to love yourself first. And until you can, but it's like, well, how do you get to that place? Well, it takes time, just like everything else. And okay, so now that you have this newfound freedom, is it, you must feel so proud of yourself, first of all. And are you pursuing more books? Are you looking at authoring more?
I am, yeah. So I'm really proud of where I've gotten to, just from like a dating standpoint. Like, I think it's great that I'm clear on what I'm looking for, and I'm not going to waver from that, just from this sense of people saying like, you're too high standard. I'm like, you know what, I'm good. And so in terms of writing another book now, I have my second book in the works. It is like, I have the theme for it. It's going to be definitely a lot different than the first one, but I do want to let this first one kind of spread its wings and fly a little bit for the next 2 years or so. And I want to feel organized and on top of things. And then I feel like I'm ready for the second book, I will release it. But I'm very excited because it follows the theme of like the complexities of people and gardens and crime and like infidelity and addiction. And like, I really played a lot with words in this one. Like, the first one is great, love my metaphors, my words, But in the second one, I literally pulled out a thesaurus and I went through and found a ton of different words that I wanted to use, and I've incorporated all the poems, and I've made it more complex, like on purpose, to follow the theme, that it's not so simple to read the poetry. It's like you really need to dive in deep and see what each poem means, because it's not so straightforward. I think in my first book, it was almost like a diary of me talking to my ex-boyfriend, being like, this is how you've hurt me, this is why, this is how I felt.
Yeah.
Second book is going to be like, here's poems and here's ideas of things that I've seen, that I've personally experienced, that are just concepts. I also have a lot of like poems from Lipstick Stains and Coffee Cups that never made the cut, that I wasn't proud of,
right,
that I'm going to kind of throw in there too, that I kind of wanted to chisel away at and make sure that they got to the point where I wanted to release them and kind of change around a couple things. So I'm really excited about the second book. It's very different, so hopefully it's well received, but if not, oh well. The first book, it's a little bit more angsty and young love, which was fair, but the second one is more like you realize that things maybe aren't so black and white, and like everyone has layers to them, and kind of like going under the layers and seeing what's going on beneath the surface under a microscope. So it's really, and the poems, they read them of like, you have to think, okay, whose side am I on here? Like, do I believe this person to be bad or good, or how do I feel about it? So it's a lot more mental energy for the second one to kind of chip away and see what's good and what's bad.
Nice. Would you be willing to share another poem with us from your book?
Yeah, sure. I can share you a couple actually. So I'll read kind of the theme of the book, and then I can read just a second one where I wrote sort of from his perspective, because I thought it would be fun to write a poem from someone who is manipulating somebody else.
Okay.
So the first one is called Lipstick Stains and Coffee Cups. So here's how it goes. Lipstick stains and coffee cups, burnt lungs caked in black, and ex-girlfriends who promise you death. How she danced for you in her bedroom in pretty black lace, and your rose-red eyes dripped like a faucet you couldn't turn off, pretending she won't kill you, as if smearing lust across undeserving peripherals makes you feel more like a man of expensive taste. You know exactly how her lips bleed honey in unfamiliar places, how she is crawling to your front door when she forgets what her name is, and when she dangles candlesticks around your throat and slices your arms open with razor blades. Don't you dare ask her if she is still starving for you, when you know damn well that a magician never reveals her tricks.
Oh.
So that's the first one.
That's intense. That's good, though. Wow.
It's a lot, yeah. I always like to warn people. I'm like, it's a little intense in my book signings, like just so that they know. And then this one I'll read. This one I wrote about. So I kind of thought, I was like, okay, maybe I can write something that is from his perspective, and like maybe if my mind was as twisted as his was, then this would talk about like what he thought in his head as he's going through the process of manipulating and abusing someone. So it was really fun creatively to write, but also a little bit dark, because I was like, oh, this is crazy that someone's mind could operate like this.
Right.
But
interesting.
Yeah, so fun creative pursuit of mine. So this one is called Pretty Baby. Come here, pretty baby, with your cotton candy lungs and moonlit skin. Collapse into me like an avalanche, careful not to show them the color draining from your face as you snap your limbs in half to tangle yourself in my roots. Sneak into my graveyard after hours, salt your flesh with nostalgia and pepper your bones in nonchalance. Sing for me, pretty baby. Drill me into your mind like a growing brain tumor. Water me like a wilted garden. Practice me like a false religion. Kneeling at a dusty altar, worshiping the God you no longer believe in. Don't worry, pretty baby. The numbness won't leave you once I do. Soon you'll learn to adore the taste of crimson, slicing your throat open like glacier water. And when you finally reach for the door, don't forget to wipe your chin clean and say thank you for teaching you that even the coldest things can start to feel like home in the dead of night.
Wow. Ooh, yeah. I've got all the chills.
I know, it's chills reading it too.
Yeah.
Like, dark world out there.
It is, and the thing is like you brought it up earlier, your naivety, and you can have that naivety like when you're 18, and you can also have it when you're 30 and 40, and sometimes these things come and rock your world, and you don't even know it's coming. So, do you have one of your poems that, like from the end of your book, that shows a little bit of like that wow, I'm the healing side of it?
Oh, the happiness one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I could talk about I could talk about one called Nailed. Give me one moment here.
Okay.
So this one is going to be it's about sort of how I learned to recognize people who are negative, and how I was able to recognize people who maybe don't have the best intentions, and I can pick up on it instantly.
Nice.
So before, I think, as you are very naive, you sort of go through it and you don't know what to look out for, and now it almost gives me like a gut reaction. Like I can feel my gut, and I can feel it sort of twisting in my gut once I come across someone who is like this, even just in passing. Like I feel energetically like my gut will just twist, and I'll be like, okay, there's evil around me.
Right. Yes.
Things that sound a little hippy dippy in the clouds, but like I've always kind of operated like that. I think I have a very strong intuition, and so that's sort of hopefully, does that make sense?
It does. 100%. Yes. Yeah.
I don't know. Do you get that too ever, where you come across someone and you just don't know, but something is like off about them?
Yes, and I get it. I used to get it a lot too, but I never listened to that voice. So there was that time after leaving a few really bad relationships that I didn't trust my voice. So I didn't know if the person, was it my, was my intuition correct? Was it not correct? And just finally in the last few years recognizing like, just go with it. If it doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel right. There's a reason.
Yeah, don't even question it. Just be like, this is the truth. Just roll with it and trust.
And in time, if it winds up being okay, then it'll show itself to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah. It's better to like trust the feeling and then be maybe proved otherwise than to not trust it and then get your heart stomped on.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So so the poem is called Nailed. So I spent years nailed to the tears that drenched my bedroom floor, nailed to the moonlight that bled insomnia into my bones, nailed to the masochistic thoughts that eroded my mind, convincing me if I don't find someone just like you, my happiness will be crucified. I had it all backwards. When I get the divine luxury of meeting someone with even an inkling of you, I pick up on it instantly. I can smell the stench, the stale blood, the psychological destruction festering beneath skin like termites. I don't jog, I sprint, a mad dash to the hills, until I'm a dot in the distance. I never look back. I never even open my lips. A broken man doesn't deserve an explanation. He deserves to be strangled in silence, stripped down and screwed to the wall, shaking in shock as he holds his toolbox full of broken amp and open palms, wondering why the hell his trusted tools couldn't work on a woman he thought he could nail.
Wow. Yeah. See, that's power.
That's my favorite. It's like, it always gives me goosebumps to read because I'm like, nails.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really great. I don't walk. What did you say? I don't walk, I run? Or I don't run, I sprint.
Don't walk, I sprint.
Yes, I love that. The power in that. I know I keep saying that, but you exude strength to me. And I think that this is going to be such a powerful episode for a lot of people to listen to, whether it be a man going through something, whether it be a woman going through something. And I know for sure that like I said to you, I haven't gotten your book yet, but this is definitely now, like just hearing some of them, the power that's in it. I cannot wait to get, I can't wait to see.
Thank you so much. It's been quite the journey, and it's been very terrifying, honestly, to put it out there. Like even speaking on podcasts about it, I can feel it's a nice sense of knowing that like my words and hopefully my poetry can help somebody else going through it. But it is hard for me to always go back there and be like, oh yeah, that was terrible. But I'm like, okay, I need to just keep pushing forward and be like, that was awful, built something, and now I can hopefully use it to help somebody else. Like my goal would be if someone were to buy the book, read it, and then be like, book saved my life, or this book was able to like help me get out of an abusive relationship, then I would be like, okay, now my work here is done.
Yes.
We've helped. It's like, you know, it's like the full circle moment of just like being there for people and supporting them, because I felt like when I was in it, I had a support system, but I actively sliced them off because that's what he wanted. Like he wanted me to be isolated. And so I think learning to like not be isolated and to make sure you have layers of support, people around you to support you when you're going through hard stuff is like, it's optimal for your growth and for your mental health.
Absolutely. And things like this, that if you do feel that you don't have anybody, say, like you mentioned, you felt like you lost a lot of friendships, and these are like having a podcast, having a book out there, there's so much support even in that you don't have to feel alone. Right. So where can we find your work? Where can we buy your books? And yeah, do you have any social media that we can follow?
Yeah, I got all the things. So my main source for everything book related. So my name is Jamie Louise Madigan, and my website is jamielouisemadigan.com. So that's JamieLouiseMadigan.com. And so there you can see there's a video. I was on the news at 6 in the morning, and I have a little video talking about the book launch and the release, so more information about it there. You can also buy it directly from my Shopify page on my website, and there's a list of where it's available in Calgary. So it is available at all of the Indigos in Calgary and also available in a lot of independent bookstores. And I'm in the process of getting it on Amazon right now, so it should be on Amazon in the next couple months. But right now, the main place to get it would be the Indigos in Calgary. Or if you're not from Calgary, I would go just directly onto my Shopify page on my website, click buy now, and it'll link you to a page, and I will ship it off for you. So yeah, and my social media is Instagram, so Jamie Louise Madigan at Instagram, Facebook, Jamie Louise Madigan on Facebook, and then Twitter. For some reason, the Louise in the middle was not available, so Twitter is Jamie L Madigan at Twitter. So yeah.
Right on. This has been such a wonderful conversation. I mean, it's a very deep topic, but I think it's, like we said, it's unfortunately probably relatable to a lot more people than we know. And I think it's really going to help. I think it's going to make a difference for somebody, and that's my hope.
Yeah, I hope so too. Like that's the goal, and I always like to give people that hope at the end, knowing that like, yes, it starts out darkness of my book, but like there is that hope at the end, and to always just remind yourself that you got to trust your gut feeling, and even when it's scary and you feel like you don't feel safe leaving the relationship, like there's so many resources out there. You can contact like your women's shelters, you can contact anyone in the mental health space, I'm sure is willing to give you a helping hand in regards to all this, especially people, friends and family, especially. So
exactly.
There's a lot. So fingers crossed, and hopefully if you read the book, you enjoy it, and let me know what you think. If you do, get a copy. I love to hear what people's favorite poems are and which ones speak to them and which ones really hit them in the feels. So
yeah. Almost, most definitely. I will definitely get back to you and let you know what I thought, and I'm already blown away by it. So I thank you again for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on. It was really nice, and I'm looking forward to your podcast too, seeing the momentum that it takes. And it's a really great topic to bring people on and talk about mental health. Like I think it's very good because everyone has a story to share. So
I know, and it's amazing, like we said, the trickle effect, right? And that's, getting this out there with, it's just been great. I always say that. Is it just being? Oh, I have one other question for you, and I can't believe I almost forgot. It was, what is one of the last best things you do every night before you go to bed?
Oh, like my nightly routine.
Yeah.
Okay. So my nightly routine is I always, this is so cheesy. I always watch, just to wind down, I always watch an episode of Love is Blind.
Nice. That's
Yeah, so
awesome.
random. I used to, like, I'll just explain this briefly. So I used to be very against reality TV. I was like, this is silly, like, whatever. But a lot of people were talking about it, and I'm so enthralled with it because it's from a psychological perspective. For those of you who don't watch it, it's basically couples who are put into these pods. They don't see each other. They just have to build an emotional connection based on like just words and just their conversations. And they're in these pods for hours, and then you decide to spend your life with the person that you've met in the pods, and then they put you into the real world outside the pods, and then you get to meet all these other couples, and you get to see the people that you also spoke with in the pods and who you've rejected, and it just shows like the dynamics of human relationships like in such a microscope way, and seeing how like every couple is different and everyone has different boundaries and communication styles and conflict resolution or pet peeves, and it just is so interesting for me to watch. And it is like high res too, so like the editing is really great, the news is like modern and up to date, so it really is just my like wind down show. I love just watching, like I love watching the different dynamics, and like then I'll sit there with like my hairbrush, and I'll just like brush my hair and like take my makeup off, do like a little do obviously my like cream on my face, and then I always wear some lip chap and have a nice cold glass of ice water, and then I tuck myself into bed.
Nice. Like I said, it's been amazing to have you on as a guest, and now we know all the places. I'll have all your links and stuff attached to the episode, and everybody should be able to get a hold of you and reach out to you.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate having you. I feel like we really dove in deep, and we got some really good nitty gritty, and it was nice to kind of bounce back and forth with conversation with you. So I really appreciate you having me on.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it means a lot. It really does.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, have the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast today. It's been a really great episode, and I want to thank Jamie so much for taking the time to spend with us and share her story. And it was vulnerable, it was real. I really think it's an important subject, and the more people that talk about it and are open, hopefully it adds some strength to somebody else that might be going through similar situations. Again, you can follow me on Instagram at carryonwithcarrie_podcast, or on Facebook at Carry On With Carrie Podcast. I'm also on Spotify right now. It's Spotify Carry On With Carrie Podcast. And if you feel compelled to follow, to share, to all the things, that would really help get the word out there and maybe help just one person at a time.